Hello, Mr. Jeremiah. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. So far, have you been enjoying the conference?
Well, I would say I've gotten value, right? Having to invest this much time. As a matter of fact, go off work and come here to hear the speakers speak. I think I've been able to get value from what they've said so far.
Oh, that's really interesting. And I know you had a session where you spoke around building scalability, predictability, and one thing popped up in my head when you were talking, still playbook. Every high-performing organization will have a playbook whereby they maybe follow principles and follow procedure. So, and I want to believe that with Gopaddi that existed, because for you guys to have gotten to this far, you guys would have put a lot of structures in place. Now, can you just let me know, don't give me just snippets of how you encourage your team to follow that principle. So for example, now in a culture, or rather in your organizational culture, how was it like? How was it structured to make sure that every moving part of the organization saw that Gopaddi got to this level that they were in?
Okay, so I would say at first, it was not something that was exactly easy. Of course, when you bring people into new environments, right, there's this resistance to change. And when we first came up with this model, the Scale Agile framework of development, a lot of developers were questioning, why did we have to do it this way? Where we were coming from, this was how they did it. Why are we being made to do things this way? Even myself as product owner, I found myself questioning why we were doing things certain kind of way, right? But eventually, when we started, or when we became fully embedded in the system, one of the things we realized was that, or what everyone got to realize was that this framework was not just something that would take our time. So our planning sessions, let me give you a snippet of how it usually looks like. It's an event that lasts for 2 days and 6 hours for each of those days. Because we more than 6 hours of each of those days. So we plan what we are going to be delivering, features, identify enablers for the next 3 months. So sometimes developers are people who do not necessarily like meetings because they just want to code and ship codes, right? Now, having to get them to the point where they would sit down for 6 minutes in a meeting was a lot. But eventually they got to understand that every 6 hours we invest in planning would save us potentially maybe 12 hours of redundancy when we start implementation. Because during these processes, or what this playbook afforded us, was that it gave us the panoramic view of things, and we could identify dependencies early, and we could also tell when things would go wrong and potentially also solve those things, or make sure whatever that needs to be put in place is put in place so that things do not go wrong.
That sounds like a lot of work. 6 hours.
It is actually, and honestly, I think I should not say this, but if my boss gets to hear this, but so the planning session is one of the sessions I do not really enjoy about the job, because it takes a lot from you, both mentally and intellectually and physically, of course, because having to sit through 6 hours of meeting it's a lot. But at the end of the day, what we come out with is value, right? And we come out with so much clarity that we know what we should do next, when we should ship that thing, and how we are going to get it done.
Okay, interesting. Very interesting. So that brings me to another question of, you mentioned about how you guys had a planning session. So are there some certain mistakes? So say an organization is looking, or a product developer is listening to you right now. Are there some mistakes that organizations make in terms when they think about scaling? Maybe just say, oh, we want to build a project, and they just bam into it. Are there some mistakes that I say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this,
okay,
as an expert?
First of all, I think I said something during my session. And one thing that people really take for granted is decentralized product ownership, right? For most organizations, the CEO calls the shot. And I think someone asked a question around that earlier today, that what if the boss comes around and says, this is what we must do? Right? What the dangers of things like that is that you will end up planning, and someone somewhere can just come and change everything because they want you to do things a certain way. So what I would advise organizations to do is, and if I had the opportunity to have answered that question that lady asked, I would have said this to her. right? Build systems. People cannot keep malice with systems. People cannot get angry at systems because the system is the system. And if someone, let's say in hierarchy, come and say, we are going to get this done, whatever they are bringing should be subjected to whatever system that you have created. If it doesn't scale through, it's not going to be built. There's no sentiment about it, right? But if there are no systems and we allow everything, or people allow everything just flow into development, there are going to be a lot of bottlenecks and they will end up having a lot of want to do's that and few of things that have been shipped or built.
So you mentioned something around building systems, right? Now, I know that with systems come culture, and it ties to the earlier question I asked too. How do you feel that, for example, you have a system now and the culture you already have existing in the organization is battling with the system in terms of the people, the processes. How do you fit everything together so that it can work?
Okay, so and one thing to note is people drive systems, right? As much as, yes, you can create the system, it requires human efforts, people's efforts to make it work, right? And how you can take this from being just systems to being something that eventually becomes culture. Like I said, when we first started, a lot of people were close to change.
Yes.
Right? But gradually we made them understand that this thing is for our own good. And once we were able to get buy-in from everybody, it became a way of life for us because it was no longer something we had to force them to do. It was something they understood that we have to do because this is what we wanted to get. So for businesses who already have systems or that are trying to bring in new systems, what I would encourage they do is that they should, of course, build that systems around people, right? And get the right people to drive those systems. And of course, if you have key stakeholders, not necessarily top business ownership or top business leadership, if you have key people driving these systems and they're able to use data to convince business stakeholders why a system should be adopted, I think no one would throw that out of the window.
Just made so much sense. Do you know why I said that? Because there was a time I was reading something and it talked about stakeholders buying, talked about building people around systems. building systems around people, because at the end of the day, it's the people that would do the work. Exactly. So, last question. No, maybe two questions so that you can go and listen to other sessions. I think in my mind, Agile exposes a lot of issues, gaps, right? Unlike the former waterfall model, whereby I remember the lady asked a question about having timeline for the entire project. But I know that Agile, you see mistake. When your team was building Gopaddi, how did you navigate mistakes? How did you accountability?
Okay, so I would lie if I said we did not have our own learning curves and we did not make quite a couple of mistakes, right? So when we started off initially, we had to outsource our talents. So our developers were not in-house, so we were outsourcing, right? But one of the things we noticed when we were like 5 months into development, we realized that these things could easily be done by developers in Nigeria and we could easily just bring all of these things. That was a gamble we took because the notion around in the market about Nigerian developers is that Nigerian developers are no good and all. So we had to make that very tough call because we had spent lots of money, hundreds and thousands of dollars that had been spent, right? And 5 months into it, some of our developers came together and they realized this thing, for us to make it work, let's have people here that we can see getting this thing done. So we had to make that call. It was a difficult call. It costed us money, but we did that. Now, one of the things that we took away from that, if we were to start all over again, of course, we know not to outsource. We know that we should, of course, have our team in-house, because if you have your team in-house, you can manage the way they work, and of course, they work based on your own terms, right? So yeah, that's one of the key learnings and key mistakes that we made that we were eventually able to correct, even though it cost us quite some money.
That's really profound, because I like to believe that mistakes are learning points. Yes. So I mean, when you're building the next product, right, or the next service, you know that this is what you're going to do.
Yeah. And also to add, after that phase, things became so better that we could just take up any feature, no matter how big it is. And
Okay.
in 2-3 months, we are done and we are shipping already.
Wow.
So because we're able to understand, learn from our mistakes and iterate on it.
Lesson learned. So final question. What is like the key learning points that you would want somebody listening to you, that maybe they say, oh, we have a product we are delivering, or well, we want to hear somebody that is an expert there. One word, one sentence.
Master the art of execution.
Ah, yeah, that's big. Oh, that's deep. I say one sentence.
It's a sentence, sir.
It's a sentence, I know, but it's deep.
Yeah.
But okay. All right. They say you should master the act of execution. Maybe another time you
I will
break
explain
it down
that,
for
yeah.
us. Thank you so
Hopefully.
much.